To you, Angel, over to you.
Namaste and greetings. I, Pranjal Dubey, a researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, प्रभाग एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान नई दिल्ली, extend my warmest welcome to you all to hashtag IMPRI Web Policy Talk. Today, we have gathered for a special talk on the topic Gender and Media by Ms. Anita Parihar as a part of the series The State of Gender Equality hashtag Gender Gaps, organized by IMPRI Gender Impact Study Center. It's an honor for me to introduce the chair, the speaker, and the discussants. Today, we are beyond honor to have Professor Vibhuti Patel, former professor, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, as the chair for today's deliberation. Very warm welcomes to you, ma'am. With the permission of chair, I would like to introduce the speaker. Vibhuti ma'am, may I?
Please introduce the speaker. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Today, it's an honor to have Ms. Anita Parihar. She has been a researcher, media practitioner, academician, and senior visiting lecturer for media studies for university students cumulatively for 34 years. She has worked in India as well as in the UK as a British Council scholar, for which she was selected twice consecutively in 1988 and 1989. Her current research is in the areas of development of sustainable life and TV productions with cutting carbon footprints towards positive climate change, building cloud media, workflow constructions, designing VR app for media literacy, media information literacy for youth with disabilities, and e-content generation programs. She holds a master's in women's studies from SNDT Women's University, Mumbai, where her dissertation focused on leadership through the feminist lens. We are so glad to have you, ma'am. Welcome. We are also fortunate to have our discussants, Dr. Khevana Desai, Assistant Professor, Department of Sociology, Mithibai College of Arts, Mumbai. We are so happy to have you, ma'am. Welcome. Dr. Saptam Patel, Assistant Professor, Amrut Mody School of Management and Assistant Dean, Undergraduate College, Ahmedabad University. We welcome you, ma'am. Thank you so much for coming. Nischint Hora, Honorary Co-Projects Director, Vacha, Mumbai, and a former producer at Doordarshan. We are so glad to have you, ma'am. And Shaili Chopra, the founder of She, the People.tv and Golfing Indian. Thank you so much for coming, ma'am. I extend a hearty welcome to all of you. We look forward to learning from our distinguished speaker and eminent panelists, and we look forward to having an enriching deliberation. With that said, I invite Dr. Vibhuti Patel, ma'am, for the opening remarks. Thank you so much. Over to you, ma'am.
Vibhuti ma'am, please unmute.
Vibhuti ma'am, please unmute.
Thank you, Pranjal Dubey. And first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Arjun Kumar and Simi Mehta from IMPRI to include this topic of gender and media in this whole policy think tank discourse. And I greet my first of all, Dr. Anita Parihar, who has done a lot of work on the subject, Dr. Khevana Desai, Dr. Saptam Patel, Ms. Nischint Hora, and Shaili Chopra for taking part in this important discussion. We all know that in Indian women's movement, the first phase, that was in the early 70s, where the major uproar against the sexist portrayal of women in media, both print media as well as in theater and films, it was started by Ahmedabad Women's Action Group in Delhi. In Ahmedabad, they blackened the posters. We had a protest in Delhi University and JNU against Femina Miss India. And we also know that the loss of freedom of expression during 18 months of emergency, where 5,000 women activists were in Indian jails, also made the issue of media very important, because first time we realized the importance of freedom of expression. And in the post-emergency period, what we saw was that and hundreds of young women who joined the media houses as investigative journalists in the film industry and as a copywriters, and the kind of discrimination they were facing, both discrimination and harassment, two sides of the same coin. They also started an organization called Network for Women in Media. We also saw the XP after 1980 Mathura rape campaign. We saw the rise of alternate media, Sonal Shukla in Mumbai and Kamla Basin in Delhi. They came up with so many songs, that march songs, so many earlier songs of freedom movement and revolutionary movement. They were also tweaked to get the women's aspirations and women's demands. We also organized a 10-day program, Kriti workshop, where how expression, the main theme of that was expression, and how to generate alternate media to challenge. And many of the women activists and the street fighters were also invited by the only TV channel we had, a Doordarshan, to come up with the women's programs. And also many of them were invited by the print media either to start column in regional languages, in English and Hindi. And what we saw that alternate media got institutionalized when the NGOs started taking cultural activity as a very important concern. Whatever was talked about in a hush-hush tone about the sexual harassment they faced in the office, and while covering their stories, became more vocal. We saw that after 1990, where increasing number of women journalists, they started taking up this issue. And after the Vishaka directive, we saw that more consciousness, the democratic platform was created to discuss these issues. But in the media houses, they were in a glass houses because they were throwing stone at others, but they themselves had not put their house in order. And we saw that Me Too movement became very, very articulate by 2017, and last 4 years we have seen increasing number of women in media. They have started airing their dissatisfaction, the discriminatory practices in the media houses. So here I request Dr. Anita Parihar, if she has done a comprehensive study on the subject, and ma'am, you can make your presentation first of all, and then it will be followed by discussion. You have 25 minutes to go ahead. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here, invited by IMPRI. Thanks to Dr. Vibhuti Patel, madam, who's a repository of knowledge. I humbly and very keenly present my experience in gender and media from the point of view of a media practitioner, a media teacher. So when we talk about the word gender, what comes to your mind? The word itself has a historical significance. We had the person who was responsible for it was Esther Bostrup. She was an economist, a Danish economist, who actually was doing a study on agrarian situations in the third world. I am trying to make you understand that the words that we use so comfortably today, gender and media, have a legacy. And I'm sure most of you may know, but for the audience that is buried here, I'm just running through the history, which is very important, because where we come from and how we are, we reflect in the kind of work that we do, in our professions that we choose to do. So coming back to Esther Bostrup, she wrote her second book on women and development. And this book was actually cited and became very influential because it brought to the forefront women agricultural labor that was invisible in terms of not being given its due. So this led to the seed of many more developments. Of course, I will go through them in brief. That is, women in development was what she spoke. women and development was another development which followed from this, and gender and development also. So she paved the way to, it in fact laid the seed for the UN decade of women, which I learned when I was doing my MA in media studies, that there was a decade for women organized by the United Nations General Assembly, which was an offshoot of Esther Bostrup's book on women and economic development. And before that, in India, if we look at our country, we had the Towards Equality report, which was to be submitted for the first International Women's Conference, giving a picture of the women in India post-independence. And it was a dismal picture, a sobering picture, because the upper middle class was well ensconced in their roles and choices, with due respect. But the poor, the poverty-ridden, denied reproductive care, education, so many aspects of women came into light in the Towards Equality report. Just going into this brief history to come straight today, last year we had the UN, we had the, what you call the international conference, which was virtual in 2020, which was reaffirming the other conferences that followed the first one that I explained, which was at Mexico in 75, followed by, we had the one at Copenhagen, Nairobi, all these women conferences through which we have our International Women's Day on 8th March. There's a lot of history gone to something that we women take for granted. And as a media, scriptwriter and a director in the industry, research has been my mainstay in most of my videos. Coming back to, understanding what gender is and how it came about. Let's look at the word gender itself. When you, what is gender is basically, I'm not having a class on this, but just to reaffirm to all of us that gender is a construct. It's decided by our society and our culture, by our ethnicities. And gender is something that we are born biologically as male and female, as the case may be, but we grow to be girls and then women, and we grow to be boys and then men. So these constructs need to be taken in consonance. And further, our Indian Constitution in its mandate sanctions gender equality. And having this backdrop, if I now come to looking at what is media, I think everybody is surrounded with media, as in not just watching, say, this program or other online webinars or Facebook Live or television. We are actually, the consumers have become the media makers today, in that we are learning skills in this new changing environment of how to communicate our information in different ways. I am using my mobile, my laptop is right now under process, as in it's working, but there's network problem. But in media we learn, and as a women studies background student, that the show must go on in terms of the story. Today, storytelling in various areas, whether it's professional, about, say, road making, it's about women who are having a raw deal, it's about grassroots organizations like Koro India. These stories need to be told to the masses, the civilians. We have a responsibility. And as media is actually not just, in our country, with due respect, because of our diversity, that can work in our favor for the simple reason, I wouldn't be in a position today to say that newspapers are gone and internet is in, because we have such a culturally diverse country. Even in the villages where newspapers don't reach, There was a recent study done by one of my colleagues, student in Tezpur University, on community documentaries with digital inclusion. The nut and bolt of it was that women in the community were empowered by using digital technologies to tell their stories. And today they are part of the self-governance in that particular community. So there are digital divides, yes, but there are these stories also that are happening like pebbles in a pond. And we need to, at fora like this, take cognizance of it. Coming back to media, like I said, newspapers, internet, television was my stepping stone as a media student from the SNDT College of Home Science. I had an opportunity to be an intern at the Educational Multimedia Research Center, which is now, there are 22 such centers. So I'm going back to the year 87, when I was an intern at EMMRC. And there I learned, I was surrounded by an academic environment geared for television broadcast, because EMRCs are under the UGC, under the Ministry of Human Resources, then now we call it Educational, to make programs for higher education. And my first program as an intern was how children learn to draw and how their drawings reflect their mental, physical, emotional growth. This was part of my postgraduate syllabus, which I was very knowledgeable or comfortable or both about. And I chose to make a film in an area that I knew reasonably well. So research was crucial to any good or commendable or passable film. And I say that to my students even today. For the best of films, even the fictional films, good research, which draws from reality and similar instances, is crucial. Having made about an odd 20 programs at EMRC in a span of 3 years, I was selected as a British Council scholar. My experience in UK in educational television with the BBC, and I see that across the spectrum, even in India today, at private organizations, if your work is good in terms of, following the, and even research corroborates that fact, that men and women in media don't look at stories differently. They look at the story the way it is supposed to be looked at if you're a professional. But the reality is also different from the truth in terms of that many of the news stories, which I've said in my concept note, women are relegated to features or soft stories, and men have been known to get the economic or the politically weighted stories. There are exceptions, and I come from an experience where I've had some very democratic, what you call, the director of EMRC presently, in one of his quotes, which is in my PowerPoint, you can see it like Dr. Vibhuti said in the Facebook Live post the session. I have quotes from private media heads of media organizations like Reliance CEO. These have been my colleagues and bosses over the earlier years. And over a period of time and my experience, I chose to ask them to, give their quotes for this presentation. And the CEO of ex-CEO and chairman of Reliance Entertainment, Mr. Amrut Khanna, says that I have always believed in empowering women in terms of they are occupying executive seats in management and creative. But India, as again, because of its diversity, and I very well know all of you share this, is a land of many, many mixed stories. And these stories need to be not just told by us who have today become facilitators, but by the people who themselves are doing unique work in community video. There are stringers in a recent study, which is a complete contrast by one of my colleagues' PhD thesis ongoing, which is to be published. It's on stringers in 2-tier cities who don't have the kind of leverage men reporters do. So this is again, a crisscross. There are, and in India, there are more stories which need to be addressed, and I fully understand, but other stories need to be told. So coming back to the stringers who have risen in this pandemic, in terms of job availability, because organizations are shrinking. Stringers have a better vantage and a view to give in stories. But for female stringers in 2-tier cities, as the research by Bhargava from Hyderabad University says in 2020, that they have a raw deal. And even if they do go out, say, to sit in front of a pawn shop to take a story, their comfort level with themselves may be there, but the opposite recipient or the interviewee needs to look at women in that sense. So many such questions are there, because in those workplaces, like ma'am was saying about the Vishaka guidelines, they are not there in place. So such stories, I feel, need to be told time and again, and each story is unique. What I'm sharing, my colleagues will have a vast number of things which I would learn from them. But I would say, if I look back at my experience in media and gender, I have had students who have been sexually abused from Sophia College. I won't mention names because it's such a progressive department, and they have chosen to make a film on their experience, which has become a catharsis for them because they have shared their story on media. Like that, a transgender student shared her story with the support of her parents and the student fraternity. And that story gives you not at all the feeling to pity them, because you feel they are people in their own right who have made their choices and gone ahead a step further to make a film which is educational to many other people who don't have the voices to speak. And as a writer and a director in television since the last 34 years, and an academician, and I'm very proud of the learnings I've had from my senior colleagues in the academic fraternity. I think I always continue learning, because today, if you look at the social media, it can be used for very interesting purposes. You have people who use social media using the oldest form of communication, street plays. When we had the very friction and tricky issues like the amendment bill for the immigrants into India, stories which cannot be vociferously told because many reporters are being issued defamation cases by the media organizations which are having political or corporate leanings, have chosen to take these visual arts to tell stories where there is collective community interaction and response. Like, my student is making a stand-up comedy show. I said, why don't you make it about an issue that is, say, an issue in your neighborhood? Maybe it is about following corona protocols. But like Jaspal Bhatti in Doordarshan days, used humor to convey social messages. So there is a great possibility, and there are many areas where people from different specializations, in my case media, in the others it could be an engineer, it could be a women studies student, this cross connection of people, which our NEP, National Education Policy, highlights, is the need of the hour to come out with situations or projects which serve communities. So I won't say that it has been hunky-dory all the way in my trajectory. There are moments when women, journalists are sidelined for bigger stories by men. But there are ways at forums, at meetings, where women and men can, without getting the ego involved, keep the issue in mind and go together. Because really, let's look at it. We need our men folk, and the men folk definitely need the women. A woman's, advertisement on TV, which were earlier before the 80s were not so prevalent, gives vibrancy in terms of, even the woman who's in the street who cannot have desires or who cannot realize her desires of economic stability, watching a video of a working woman or a working woman reaching a certain level gives a lot of motivation. So media can be used as a mirror to show aspects of society which society has a bias in, but to rise above that and show a picture by which society can move forward, can improve from their last step on the ladder. And I enjoy teaching students because I feel they are like a sponge. They are open to ideas. My recent study is on digital routines of adolescent girls in the pandemic. And it's an ongoing study. It's been accepted for presentation at the International AMIC conference in November. I had been doing a longitudinal study on the same, on everyday digital routines in 2018 of schoolgirls. And I was amazed to see that from the focus group discussions, as well as the, video which I screened on cyberbullying, the stories that the students came out with and the suggestions they came out with. In today's online teaching mode, you can flip the classroom and you can give the student the mic to speak, because this is an area where we also have to unlearn some things, to learn things, to change according to times, because we all have to survive. Now, if you look at the new media, it is not on advertisements, it's on subscription. So how do we monetize? These are other aspects. But coming back to gender and media, which is something which is, I feel, basically through my experience and not just my feelings, students, the young generation, in conjunction with us who have the experience and have seen changes, need to join hands, because we are at the cusp. We are making history. Now, how we choose to make it with the pandemic, how are the shrinking work situations in crisis coming out with some new innovations that are workable, like the community project, which I mentioned by the Tezpur PhD student. There must be many, half a dozen stories or even more, where such stories of rural women being empowered through interventions by ICT, through government interventions, through UN interventions, have become empowered. Koro, India, where I was doing my internship as an MA student, I realized in the case study that I did in a few years back, that the staff of Koro comprises itself of grassroots leaders who have chosen, even in the Children's Film Society of India, children who are empowered through their experiences, telling their stories, leads the way to many, to maybe take a strand or another strand of whichever story they identify with, to go ahead. And I remember I was getting my car serviced. This is totally off the cuff, but there's a relation to it. And the technician told me, "Madam, आप बहुत दिन के बाद आए हैं, सब कुछ normal है, आप काय को घबराते हैं about the corona." So I said, what have you learned from this experience? I asked him because he was a regular technician over the last 4 years, servicing my car. He said, Madam, मैं सोचता हूँ कि we have to help as many people as we can, monetarily or whichever way. If 500 निकलते वो दे दो. I mean, for a man who is a technician in a car company to understand that the pandemic has made one shift in the thinking, but not only thinking, in the doing is the next step. I would say in each of us, if we can find ways to address, in our own domain. For me, getting my students to do public service advertisements about eve teasing in a way which is not sermonizing, in a way which the men and the women look at it very realistically, because that story is researched. It is about eve teasing, which has its connotations for the male and the female, and in both perspectives are shown with a well-researched video. More of the audience will identify. And today the content is the king in terms of media. Even I feel the biggest high a teacher gets is when her student does better, which is even for the same for parents. We are most happy when our children do better than us. I have students who, I mean, I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I have already taken backstage. These students are so much in the process of churning out their experiences, which are affecting is a big word, let's be realistic, causing small ripples for the better in the community. My student who was a transgender and a media student had the courage to run away, which was a foolish courage, got back by her parents from Patiala, joined Xavier's. Till then, she was a boy wanting to be a girl. She was most unhappy with her body. And she is a person who is one of the best scriptwriters on Netflix today, but very grounded because of her experience. And if somebody can, watch a video or two like these, where you understand that the human ability to be your best is what matters in this lifetime in the planet Earth. That is what really counts. So I would like to, going back to my slide, if I'm running out of time, please keep telling me, because I don't want to encroach on other people's time. I have a lot to learn from the others today, from their experiences. But I would say that research has helped me in gender and media, through various projects, and seeing other colleagues, my students' projects, to realize that there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do in our country. And even if we take it, this pandemic through the crisis has, in the OTT industry, in the media industry, it has opened doors for content writers. By that, simply put, if I have a woman in this audience, or a student, or a researcher who feels strongly about her research and wants to convert it into a video, there are takers for good stories. By good, I mean stories which affect audience. While we feel that Netflix and all the OTT platforms must be having a lot of scope for bettering the kind of content, there has to be self-regulation. You can't just show. People even today are fatigued by, in an sexual explicit scenes, or they realize that good content is a sure shot winner. And never before has there been such a wide market for good content in any area. It could be in artificial intelligence. It could be in gender violence. It could be in roles which lead to gender violence, which Koro had done as an experiment, and I was a participant observer, where they got women from the Mofussil areas and asked them what aspects of TV impact them in terms of serials and songs, and how it was amazing to see, like I said, we get educated. Every time we get educated from people who have the sensitivity to look at media and see through it, and then appreciate something that is totally in contrast. So when, yes?
Yeah, so I was just saying that.
Am I crossing or?
Yes, yeah. We would like to discuss.
I will wrap up, ma'am. This has been, my PowerPoint is definitely going to IMPRI and all who are watching it. I think sometimes, like we saw in the film Chakte, and adversity can be changed to tell your story, and the story that is based on substantial research of other people or the person who's the speaker carries weight, because there may be some story which you can add which is totally different from mine. On that note, I humbly thank IMPRI and Dr. Arjun Kumar, Dr. Vibhuti Patel, Dr. Saptam, Khevana Desai, and Nischint Hora, and I think there's another speaker who's
Shaili Chopra. Miss Shaili Chopra. Miss Shaili.
Pleasure to look forward to hearing you. Thank you for giving me your time.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Anita Parihar. I think your presentation very exhaustive. The way you have profiled that how we have come a long way. Because now as you said, content is the king, and now even we have so many hundreds of media schools in the university system also. So grammar of media, the way like we were doing it just ad hoc way, because you get invited, you learn by experimenting, but now that is not there. But what we see is that we have gone now beyond challenging stereotypes, and we are also providing alternatives. I think that you brought out very well and succinctly by giving example of the gender diversity that is also coming up. Those who were trivialized earlier or laughed at, or whose experiences were not even legitimized by media, transgender community and all, and the way mainstream media, Karan Johar film, portrayed transgender persons as a joker, no, and which was extremely objectionable, and now I think there is a lot of reflection that is happening. And at the same time, if you see here, we have Dr. Mrudu Luppan, who was in the planning board of Kerala. How Kerala has used the media for literacy mission. It reached nearly 100% literacy, and the role of media. Koro's predecessor, Akshar Dara, where Madhav Sathe had started on a television channel. It was the only Doordarshan. I think Nischint was at that time a producer of Doordarshan, and how it created Jnandeep Mandal. No, the local community, the people were watching TV like completely 100% attention. They would, even in the bastis I have seen, they would finish all their work to sit in front of their Jnanadeep program. And they had created a whole community, the way the anchor and the community, he became a community hero. So I think that was the kind of impact that media has. And here we have all four discussants who have themselves been producer of creative media for gender sensitization. My first question will be to the sociologist, Dr. Khevana Desai. She's herself, you have been writing both, she's very active both in social media and Gujarati regional media. She also interacts with the students, with the literature, and with the journalists in a very, very active way, proactive way. So I would like, Khevana, your response to the lecture, as well as what you have been doing for gender responsive media creation.
First of all, thank you, IMPRI, and thank you, Dr. Arjun Kumar, Dr. Patel, and looking forward to hear many more discussions. Taking it from where Anita ma'am has, I would say, stopped, or she has opened discussions, I will request IMPRI to allow me to share the screen. Yeah, now I can. I have some questions, basically more than a discussion, that I want to raise at this forum right now. Is the screen visible?
Yeah. Yes. Only thing, make it full screen. Make
Yeah,
it full
I'm just doing it. Yeah. Is the full screen visible now?
Yes.
Okay. So with reference to, as Dr. Vibhuti Patel said, with reference to regional media, and that too now multilingual media on OTT as well. So these are the two places where I want to see what is happening, what needs to be done. Some questions that we would like to ask us and to other discussants or audience in general. What is gendered media? Is it that media which is gender conscious? Is it that media which is gender sensitive? Or is it that media which is women centric? This is the content which is women centric. So is every women centric content gendered? Is every women centric content gender just or gender conscious? Or just because you have many women characters that we see in K-dramas all the time, not the Korean K-dramas, the Balaji K-dramas, that you have so many women on television, does that mean it is gender sensitive or gender conscious media? Okay, we have so many women characters on OTT platform. Does that mean they are feminist contents? Are we looking at how many women are there on screen, or are we looking at what kind of women are there on screen? What kind of women are we portraying on screen? Be it regional or be it even for that matter, even print media, what kind of women's stories are we bringing about? Or is it that in a newspaper, how many stories are gendered, or how many stories are evolving around women or transgenders or queer for that matter? Are we looking at how women are represented, or how are we recognizing women on screen or off screen, bringing them on screen or bringing in their stories? So again, the question is, are we looking at women in media, or are we also supposed to look at women media which is created by women? All women in media is not created by women. Okay, all content on media which is women centric is not necessarily created by women. So does that mean that media which is created by women is looking at women differently than media created by men? And if that is a difference, then should we then have, should we also assume that media created by women is also gender sensitive or not? Based on these questions, I have just analyzed a few of our regional media, print first and a little bit of audio visual as well. We had magazines, and I'm familiar with Gujarati literature and a partly of Hindi or a little bit of Marathi literature, not much of other literature. So I'm not commenting generally on all languages, but this is what, say, I would say Western Indian content. In Gujarati, we had in 1970s a magazine called Sudha, and now we have a magazine called Lekhini, run by women for women. The content has changed over a period of time, management has changed, but three things that they never included at that time and even today is they will not include food, film, and fashion. Generally, the magazine that you can see on my right side, Guru Shobha, has always revolved around these three things. And the beauty tips and everything, how a woman should look, etc. Enough has been said that all cover pages of magazines, be it gendered, women-centric magazine or not, always had a good-looking, sexy-looking, aesthetically dressed or not dressed women, whether it's a Diwali special or otherwise. So you always had that kind of a stereotype, which these magazines, right from 1970, which was started by our literature legend Dhirubhen Patel and then taken over by Varsha Adalja. Lekhini was run by Meenal Dixit and now taken over by Preeti Jariwala. And the content is not women-centric, but the content is definitely gender-conscious, and that is more important. The 75th issue of Lekhini is all about, on the 75th year of our independence, about all the unsung heroes of our independence. This is brought by women, written by women, not necessarily about women. Gendered media need not be only women-centric, but gendered media definitely is gender-conscious, gender-sensitive, and talking about those who are at marginalized. So on one hand, we have Guru Shobha. It was in Hindi and Gujarati for sure. I'm not sure about the other languages. But on the other hand, we also had something called Sangini, which was run in Hindi for a very long time by Divya Jain and quite gender-sensitive content.
And each issue was a special number.
Correct. Unfortunately, it closed down for some reason, but definitely the old issues are available in the libraries and online, I think also, and we need to look at them as our research content. Empowerment columns, which were written by Sonal Shukla for 40 years in different Gujarati newspapers, are testimonies of gender-sensitive, gender-conscious data. And it was not just data, it was analysis of her data. Her column was not called just Ghatna, it was called Ghatna Nu Artho Ghatan. It was the analysis of what is going on in field of gender and feminism. The newspaper supplements that we generally have in regional media are a mixture of these food, fashion, film on one side and quite academic, activist or literarily aesthetic material on the other side. And somewhere or the other, some of them at least, I would say Ladki from Mumbai Samachar is able to have a balance on that. Whereas Sayyar, for that matter, from Gujarat Samachar has so far not been able to bring that balance. We're not against beauty tips. We are not against food, recipes. But women are much more than that, which been fought for last 30, 40 years. But somehow some of these supplements in newspapers are still stuck somewhere there, which needs to change. Talking about alternate media, I'm sure Nischint Hora will be talking about it, but names that we need to mention when it comes to street play, songs, short films, mono acts, people like Minal Patel, Trupti Shah, Sarup Dhruv, Kamla Basin have been constantly doing the efforts towards having literally aesthetic and at the same time quite feminist content. We're not, it's like dry academic research. It's also interesting. It's also literally interesting, palatable, and yet at the same time hits the right chord. Women-centric television serial, I must mention that Didi Girnar for some time has been doing a very good job there in spite of having very limited resources. Last year, the first Gujarati feminist novel, Batris Putulini Vedana, was televised by Rupa Mehta. Now again, that's what I'm saying. A regional media by women also makes a lot of difference. When a woman is there as a director or a producer of DD or any of these mediums, the content tends to be different, tends to be more gender sensitive and not just women centric. The demand generally is how many women characters are there on the screen. What are the dialogues that they are having? Bechdel test and other things. But we're not still looking at is that content only women centric or even gendered. Coming to audio visual media, we all know that the shows that goes on in most of the commercial television serials are absolutely gender type. I'll just give you 2 or 3 examples on my left. That is on my screen. The titles itself says Kauchu Samrocho, and the advertisement was obviously very stereotyped. And these are all which are running in last 1.5 years. Another one which is called Rashi Rikshawali and started with a girl, women driver, rickshaw driver, ultimately ended up in the similar stereotype portrayal of women. On the top, there is one in Marathi. Generally, it is in that Bengali, Marathi, and Malayalam content is definitely more gender sensitive than what it has been in Gujarati so far. I'm not generalizing it, but in majority cases. But here too, Agabai, Sasubai, and things like that. The Saas Bahu drama is something that we're just not able to escape. Maybe imitating from the Hindi mainstream channels. Colors Hindi initially started with some kind of revolutionary topics of Balika Vadhu, but which again ultimately ended up in glorifying and romanticizing these kind of social problems rather than fighting against them. So it's not only about showing that there is a problem, it's also about how are we showing that problem and what happens to that problem ultimately in the serial. Whether it is extramarital affair, women taking a stand, walking out of the marriage, then what happens to women? Or are we going to look at, unless she's an ugly Betty or Jessie koi nahi, that she's ugly, then she's bold or she's intelligent. You can't have a bold and beautiful character at the same time, otherwise she's a vamp. And she's using all her intelligence in wrong. I know this is all very old in 60s and 70s, but something that has not changed in 2021 or maybe simultaneously going on. I've also heard, I have not watched much of Pakistani serials, but I've heard that they are definitely more gender sensitive than our mainstream regional channels. We had one Helaro 2 years back, and I don't know how many more years we will have to wait for one more Helaro. Saptam madam is also here, Vibhuti ma'am is also here, and I'm sure Nischint ma'am also must have watched it. We need revolutions, we need more feminist content. And when I say feminist, I'm not just saying women-centric, feminist content in its sense. And Gujarati film industry especially had to wait for a very long time for one Helaro. And I don't know how many more years we have to wait for one more Helaro. It's not about being rural-centric or urban-centric, but are we showing gender-sensitive or gender-conscious content? Coming to a little bit of OTT platforms, some of them are already watched by us, some of them may not have been watched by us. These are the television serials or web series my students have analyzed from gender perspective. Okay, and I've put 2 different sets of content here. On one side, The Great Indian Kitchen, I'm sure all people related to gender and media must have watched it. I have Tribhanga on one side. And on the other side, I have love stories of 4 more shots. Okay, now how are we looking at these OTT content? In terms of accessibility, we all know digital divide. We all know about the availability of this content to which women of urban English-speaking population or urban, at least well-to-do population has access to these kind of resources. A rural woman is not going to watch 4 shots, please, or she doesn't have stable internet connection or electricity, and definitely she doesn't have her own smartphone to watch in a private space. Okay, are we looking at bold women differently now? Now, bold women in 60s and bold women now, most of the content in OTT, most of the time has a women abusing, women smoking, women drinking, women having multiple affairs, or taking a stand sometimes for herself or for others. Does that mean we are emulating men in positions where he's violent when it comes to position? Are we also showing women in a very violent position whenever she's in a higher position? You know, she's a police inspector, then she's a very abusive police inspector. If she's a rickshaw driver, then she's a very abusive rickshaw driver, behaving like those men who otherwise are also stereotyped. Again, Anita ma'am also talked about the graphic gross violence that we see on these platforms. What about censorship? Is there any kind of a censorship or self-censorship? If not, will there be, see, whether it is 12 plus content, 16 plus content, 18 plus content, and the controversies regarding those age groups are also another issue that we need to look at, but more so when it comes to gender sensitive issues. Yes, it has definitely opened new avenues. It has opened many, many more avenues for women, maybe Facebook or WhatsApp for that matter, even not even OTT platform, where so many women are now able to express, talk, write. But again, the question of morality comes in, self-censorship comes in for these women, right from Nomanita Densem Sharma to women today. Who censors a poem? We had a very recent example of Parul Khakkar's poem and the way it was being, 40,000 trollers abusing her poem, etc., etc. So somewhere or the other now, self-censorship in these online media, especially with women. What should I write? Whether I can write this as a woman or not. It's a simple example. When men writes about breasts, it's all about shringar. And when women writes about a penis, it's all about very, very, obscene content. So how are we judging shringar and obscenity in terms of gender? So just because it's women-centric again, just because the women there is smoking, drinking, and abusing, are we only showing women as both all these kind of women? So we will also have to look at, yes, avenues are there. More gender-sensitive content is definitely is there. I mean, the Great Indian Kitchen is something that we wouldn't have seen for a very long time in social media, or even forget about audiovisual media. Very intelligent dramas are coming. Intelligent, when I say intelligent, intellectually stimulating. But how much of that is there and how far is that reaching? Is popular Rashi Rikshawali watched more than Tribanga? Then we need to question that who's watching this content and for whom this content is being created. So this is what I will also be looking at. A lot of feminists who are now in their 70s, 80s must be looking at the whole media like that. We're still looking at something which is, portraying inequality in its right sense.
Yeah.
Sorry if I've taken a little more time.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Khevana Desai, for giving such a erudite and well-documented profile of whole evolution and the current state of the art in Gujarati media, both print and audiovisual media. I would like to supplement what you said about the regional media. I think we also have in Hindi excellent publication called Hum Sabla, which was edited where Kamala Basing was also on the editorial board by Jagori, which all the around 8 states in India used it for gender training. We have currently 144 Women's Studies Center, out of which there are around 40 of them have already started diploma, certificate courses and master's programs in women's studies. And there is a tremendous hunger for gender sensitive literature. Because they also they need the reference material. So that has also motivated many women's organizations and individual scholars to now contribute in terms of articles, write a column, because I can see all my feminist friends of the 80s, now they are the columnists either in Malayalam or Kannada or Telugu. In fact, the Kalpana Kandaviran, their organization, the massive project they have taken is of translation of feminist writings and writings with gender lens in Telugu. So I think that is a very healthy this thing, because unless we create the alternative, people would say that you are only, and that's how I think most of us started writing in the early 80s. And also doing program, women-centric program on the television, because when we were critiquing it, they also asked that what are your alternatives. And we have also seen E45 from Patna, which has also nearly for 6 years they brought out the issue, and all these publications are in the public domain, and also the audiovisual material which they have come up. The most distinguishing feature of the feminist alternatives to in media, they use folk tune, they use folk tales, and the imagery and symbolism, they are also culturally rooted, so that makes them very, very acceptable. Only thing, there is no commercial backing, it's only done by the voluntary effort, so the reach is limited. But still, now with the internet platform, we have got a better this thing. In fact, we have seen in last 1 week the hit with the Kamla Basin song or the monologues have got, because there is a tremendous curiosity about what the feminists have generated. And similarly, we have seen the response to Sonal Bain's this thing, the memorial meeting, and how so many people are now inquiring about the production of Vacha. We have also seen in Marathi regional media that so many iconic figures of the social reform movement, like Rakmabai, Save or Savitribai Phule, Anandibai Joshi, so many expressions, the television serials on their life, they have also emerged. So I think that we have seen. Now, connecting with that, I would like Dr. Saptam Patel, who is based in Ahmedabad, that what do you see? Do you see this kind of churning happening in Gujarat? Because what Khevana Ben is in Bombay, so she has given the scenario of Western India. But what is happening at that level? Because you are in the Management Institute and you also yourself are a painter. So what do you see the new churnings that are happening with regards to media?
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank IMPRI for giving this opportunity to share my views on this platform. I would also like to thank Professor Vibhuti Patel and Anita Parihar for inviting me to this discussion. It was extremely fascinating to listen to Anita ji and Khevana, and I'm looking forward to listening more about media and gender from Shaili and Nischint. It is true, yes, I believe that unless and until we bring these critical issues to our academic discourses, we may not be able to urge any kind of action, or impact, whether behavioral or policy related, on the issue. And so I see this discussion, today's webinar, an extremely important one, and hope that it brings outcomes in the form of awareness, sensitization, and action, more importantly. Because I'm an artist, I'll be talking about visual arts because I paint, and I think visual arts, of course, people say that art is for art's sake, but art is also for life's sake. And I think it is a part of range of means of communication which has a message to give to people, and it plays a very important role in defining the kind of culture and society that we would like to have for ourselves. The issue of invisibility or visibility of women in different areas and aspects of life of our world is nothing new. Women have always been, in whichever area that you see, women have always been deprived of their share of recognition in media and art world, and anywhere that you see. And these domains have predominantly been men's domain. So as Khevana kind of asked a very important question: how do we see this when we talk about gender in media? What do we actually mean? Are we talking about misrepresentation of women or underrepresentation of women? How do we want to approach this subject? And I would love to kind of address this from my perspective. So misrepresentation or stereotyping or overall invisibility of women from the forefronts of these industry. When I say these industry, I mean arts and media, has confirmed a very systematic kind of subordination of women, resulting in their social and professional detriment. And there have been collective individual efforts to shift the landscape and focus on addressing this diminished representation of women. But yet, as my colleagues mentioned, there's not much that has been done to fill the gap. And we have statistics, coming from International Organization on Journalism and all, about how only 4% of newspaper, radio, TV reports worldwide, challenge gender stereotypes. And as Khevana pointed out, these are most of the times covered by women. Probably it's because there is a need, internal need to kind of address these things, and women, because they have this first-hand experience, they understand it better and they want to kind of address it. How 24% of the news subjects who are interviewed, or whom the news is about, only 24% are female, and all of it. I mean, we have a kind of data on that, and the data is definitely very, very disappointing. McKinsey's study from 2019, Women in the Workforce, says that while women are well represented, and I'm kind of taking it from there, while women are well represented early in their career pipeline in media and entertainment, they are a minority at the highest levels, with women accounting for only 27% of C-suite positions. And furthermore, women's day-to-day workplace experiences in media and entertainment are worse than men's. Almost half of all respondents said they believe women in their fields are judged by different standards than men, which they say makes it difficult to achieve parity in senior management in the workforce. And I completely, identify with this, because as an artist, as a woman artist, you're judged by different standards in the art world. When we talk about media and gender, of course, we cannot deny the fact that media is an extremely powerful tool. It can build perspectives, it can shape perceptions, it can impact people. Media reflects the dominant codes of cultures, and defines the existing fabric of ideologies as well. It can further the ongoing oppression, as we can see. I mean, it can do whatever it wants to, and it has been playing a role, over there. It can actually further the ongoing oppression, and at the same time, it can also create revolutions, as we have already seen in the past. It can affect the pace with which social changes happen. And at present, we all know it has been a sluggish pace. And despite efforts from international organizations, welfare bodies, communities, governments, individuals as well, we have not been able to witness a positive and paradigm shift when we talk about gender and media. So first of all, I think my problem is media projects gender as binary. We see in terms of men and women, and hardly do we kind of, we see that media approaches gender as a spectrum. When BBC tried to educate young children about the diversity of gender identities, and it's, said that there are 100 different kinds of genders, it was not well received, and it had to withdraw that video, which was education video, which claimed the existence of 100 different genders. It had to withdraw, and you know what, they blamed media. They did say, and I kind of agree, they said that media willfully misinterpreted the content, and this kind of does influence how general people, see it, including the social media, which is seen as a younger generation's platform for indulgence. Television, radio, podcast, news, everything OTT. In majority, all of it, in majority of these cases, we see perpetuation of gender stereotypes, gender roles, bringing conformity to the existence of gender boxes and popular attributes like masculinity and femininity. Gender stereotypes and media underrepresentation of women and other genders can lead to a very distorting idea of self in these people. It can lead to a rejection of unconventional behaviors and can lead to even contempt and violence. Genders other than mainstream ones, men and women, the other genders don't feature in our media other than the documentaries and some of the commercial films, which kind of do not make it, to the popular channel. And that's the reason we don't see these people. We don't see the other genders anywhere else in the real life, except on roads, except, in the festive times, at our places, struggling to make a living. No jobs for them, despite economic and social development. No empowerment, despite reservations. No acceptance, despite the fact that they share humankind with the rest. What role? It makes us think, what role did media or did not, media play in making this dark reality of 21st century? What we see, the image of women as caregivers, homemakers, models, victims, dependents, exhibiting feminine attributes like kindness, beauty, submissiveness, and in contrast to men's representation as professionals, self-sufficient leaders, and all of it. It all exemplifies that media, of course, it has capacity, it has potential to bring changes, and it has been to some extent, but it's not at the desirable pace. It all proves that this needs to be addressed in the most severe manner. I'm an artist, and I know that the art world, whether it is visual or performing, it is a man's world. The feminist art movements, individual, collective attempts have not been able to break the glass ceiling in the art world. They have not been able to subvert the typical and traditional representation of women and their bodies. Art feminism, for more than half a century in the past, has not only been a battle against tiny representation of women in the history of art and in the art in the MoMAs and MoCAs, but also against the marginalized and objectified representation of women. From the times history has known, women have been portrayed as sexualized objects, as subjects without self, and have only been muses to male artists. And to just give it a few examples, as early as 16th century, historical reclining nude in Venus of Urbino in 1538, and it was by the famous Italian artist Titian, to a reclining nude in 1863 by the first modernist artist Edward Manet. Women have been presented with an inviting gaze, and if you look at some of the nudes portrayed by even contemporary artists, you will feel that not much has changed, unless and until it's by a female artist, and they have been portraying nudes, and they've been also kind of indulging in self-portraits in a very, very different, unconventional manner. So this continues even today. I mean, if you look at most of the Bollywood songs, and most of them, any and every song that that we groove to, they're sexist in nature, and they objectify women and shut them in boxes. And sometimes they're extremely disturbing. All these things, play a role in building our idea of, or whichever generation, is watching or kind of engaging, in building their idea of a very deceptive kind of normal. So one more, according to the data published by PRC, Pew Research Center, the female CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, I know that, it moved just from 0% in 1995 to 5% in 2015. If you look at the market share of women's, female artists in comparison to the market share of the male artists, just a slice of life. It's just a piece of cake. 1%. So, for more than 2 years, BBC journalists and producers have been addressing the issue of gender. And their representation, with the goal of reaching 50-50 gender representation every month. And I think, yes, they have been successful to some extent. In April 2019, 74% of English language programs that had been participating in 50-50 model had achieved a female contributor ratio of 50% or higher on their shows. So perhaps the answer is not, to this crucial question, is not as simple and straightforward as it may seem. It's not a battle actually where one who succeeds will win. It's a question of equality and equity and inclusivity, and I think our media and the range that it covers has potential to look at these issues very, very critically and do something about it. However, for the time being, it may take I don't know what number of years, but it may take a long for us to achieve that that sensitivity or that equality in the media coverage. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saptam Patel, for talking about the art world and the stereotypes that you are facing, and so many very iron walls of misogyny that one has to experience. But I think we have also seen that when the women's movement was in its peak during the 80s and 90s, so many women artists came together, no? In fact, where Chandralekha's exhibition called Stree, where so many of the, whether it's Aparna Kaur, Nilima Sheikh, all of them had donated their paintings, and they also brought a different image of women in the art world. And we have also a feminist art movement, which also was backed by the women's rights movement. So I think it's very important that art also flourishes in the socio-political and cultural context. Currently, except for the corporate world, you don't have any other backup, and their priorities are very, very different. And than that, and as you said, that if only 2% of the people who are in the decision-making bodies, it will also valorize the same kind of a misogyny that has been existed over centuries, as Foucault and even Edward Said, also the Oriental art, which was depicted by the male painters, and the same thing by the French women painters. The women painters showed women in the Arab world or in the Oriental society working in the field. Even the harem situation, which was highly valorized by Orientalist painters, when women painters depicted harem situation, women were cooking, they were looking after children, they were talking to this thing, they were not the reclining nudes. So we see that how the overall social movement has also contributed in changing the decentering the whole discourse on art, where women are only seen as a body, from that to women as a human being. And also the gender relations, more egalitarian depiction of gender relations. Now I would like to ask Nischint Hora, who has first of all, her career began with Doordarshan, the only media, television media that we had in our country, and her role in the formative years of Vacha were also defined by her experience in the mainstream media or the government-controlled media in a post-emergency period, because we know during the emergency there were Achar Samhitas, and currently also she has been a very important person in Vacha as a director. Over to Nischint. Please tell us about your experiences in the Doordarshan, and now what Vacha's contribution in the creation of generation of alternate media and gender sensitive.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. Thank you, IMPRI and Dr. Arjun Kumar. It's a great pleasure to be here and hearing all the discourse so far. To start with, I will of course start with Sonal Shukla, our founder trustee, since two of you have mentioned, and she's been the moving force behind Vacha and documentation, right from the women's songs, albums. We produced 4 albums of music, and another very important documentation that we have done under her is 2 documentaries of women freedom fighters, Mithibai Muktidhara and In Search of Safia Khan. Mithibai Muktidhara, both of them are on women freedom fighters of the Indian independence movement, and they were the lesser known women. the idea of the film was what inspired them to join the movement, what did they do, and more importantly, why did they step out? So you can see the film later on. I won't talk more on that. Now today I'll be talking more on what we are now doing. We're working on, Vacha is a resource center for women and girls. Basically now we concentrate on girls. So we are working with girls. So I'll talk about that. Yeah. So we work on empowerment of girls, and Bole Kishori is one of our ongoing programs where girls speak out. So the girls speak out on their issues, and the girls I'm talking about are from the socio-economically disadvantaged families, and the age group is say 10 to 16 or 18. So these are adolescents. And we give them training through workshops, and they are encouraged to tell their own stories through writing, drawing, posters, newsletters, photos, and video essays. Now, of course, it's much more. This was some years back, but it continues. So they choose to document their daily life to tell their own stories. And as you know, women and girls in our culture were always discouraged from expressing their feelings. And their perspectives of exploring a larger reality was never there. And if they had to protest, it was through folk songs and folk art, which we've seen in our women's movement songs. Now, we are right now here talking about gender and media. We mean women's participation in media. To be a participant, you have to be a recipient. You have to access media. I am now going to be talking, like I'm saying, how many of these people, women and girls, really have access to media? It is limited by, like we have mentioned so far, gender socialization. Then things like who has a remote in the house? You're watching television. And so once I say, Acha, you watch cricket? I asked the girl, then remote kiske haath mein hai? You know, so choices are limited. And if they want to watch news, तो लड़की है, तुझे क्या सुनना है, तुझे क्या फर्क पड़ता है क्या हो रहा है दुनिया में? So you know, news is not meant for them. If the newspaper comes, now of course even in the middle class or upper middle class homes, who gets it first, isn't it? So we have also worked with newspaper access to get them to, we have newspaper sessions daily, and they read and discuss the newspaper. They've also worked on accessing spaces for newspapers. Mumbai has these in the nukkards and many places in bastis. You know, you have a center where the newspapers by local political organizations or social organizations have newspapers for free reading. But who accesses those? Only men. So our bold girls from our community, and we have the learning community, other girls from other organizations, would try and access these places, would go and read it. Of course, there were lots of eyes, tu kya kariye idhar, but they could not say no, they have a right. So of course that worked for some time, and after that time, you see the space is limited, space is at a premium, so those spaces have gone. Now, to get them more interested and more active in the cause of media, Vacha, we bring the girls in each community. We work with girls and boys as well. Boys is the priority is girls. Boys are a support group. So every community brings out a newsletter twice a year. Now the newsletters are well worked out. They are one of our our highlights. We love them. They love it. We love them too. They bring out they talk about their own issues. It could be about pani ka problem, the gutter, the going to access to education, to their ration shops, anything. So they discuss the issues, they decide what should go in, and they have an editorial committee. Editorial committee has some difficult jobs of like saying, no, ye article nahi chalega, both ho gaya. So, and another very important aspect is they conduct interviews. And conducting an interview is a tough thing, like many of you would know. To go face to face, it could be to a police inspector, it could be to the rationing officer, they could be interviewing a senior in the leader or someone who's you know, with a different type of occupation, someone who does sand art on Juhu Beach. You know, they've interviewed these type of people, how to edit it and all that. So those newsletters Plus they take the photographs of the interviews of maybe a person or of the community. Now after editing it, they of course have work on the layout and everything. So they're involved in all stages of the production. Comes the newsletter release. It's released on 26th August and 15th August, 26th January. It is released in the community. It's a function, a regular big function. Everyone from the community gathers, the local leaders, their parents and family and others, boys, girls, everyone. They have a cultural program. Now here, like we all have mentioned, some Khevana and Dr. Patel have mentioned street plays. They perform street plays on their issues. They boldly talk about what they may be facing at their homes or in their schools or in their community. So it's addressed to everybody. People listen. It has become a habit. This year we had the 25th newsletter. So people look forward to it. Some of the local leaders also distribute snacks. We don't do that. They do that. Then another important aspect of the newsletter is selling it. So there's another committee amongst themselves who decide how will they sell it. They have to market it, how to talk, how to, promote it. So they nudge each other, tu ja, tu uske paas ja, and things like that. And they manage that. Even before that, to fund it, of course, we are funding it, but they do collect additional funds. They collect donations or advertisements, and they know what type of advertisements can go. So that's all part of the newsletter. So, and I spoke to a 24-year-old of ours, a past student. So I asked her, she said, मेरे पास अभी भी मेरा पहला न्यूज़लेटर है, जो और मेरा नाम देखे मुझे अभी भी इतनी खुशी होती है कि जब मेरा नाम छपा था. And this girl started from a little drawing maybe in a newsletter to growing up to be part of the editorial committee and further to more, which I will speak. Now then, next thing is, like I've already mentioned, photography. So photography is definitely taught. Now, when we started, it was very shocking that there were no photographs of the girls. They didn't have a single photograph of themselves. Holding a camera was out of question. So, and that time mobiles had just about come. So holding mobile to nahi tha. Once they learned photography, then their parents, father said, "Chal tu le mere mobile se." That much ke haan, iske paas technology hai. So technology was such an enabling factor, like even with mobiles, like computers we've been teaching them. Since they're learning these things, they're getting more power. One of the girls also told us, one of our participants, कि mobiles लड़कों को पहले मिलता है, हमें बाद में. तो हमें टेक्नोलॉजी या इवन के हमें मीडिया को एक्सेस करना और जो भी इंटरनेट पर भी पढ़ना, वो तो बाद में मिलता है. लड़कों को तो पहले हमें पकड़ना पड़ता है, ढूंढना पड़ता है. वन चाइल्ड ऑल्सो सेड कि मैं अपने पापा के सिर के ऊपर से देखकर पेपर पढ़ती हूँ. So they what they want, they manage to do. Now photography, as they want to document their own lives. They've been taught that चलो जो चाहिए वो photograph करो. Of course, we gave them themes like a day in your life, or people at work, and one major exhibition, major game changer was like safety. What do you feel is safety? What according to you is safety in your spaces? So it was heartbreaking at times, what they thought. Sometimes it was the toilets, there are no lights, or there is, very importantly, they said that public toilets के बाहर ये motorcycles park होते हैं और उधर लड़के और आदमी लोग बैठे रहते हैं और देखते हैं कि हम कौन जा रहा है, pads कब बदल रहे हैं, क्या क्या वैसे. तो वो था. Plus they had lights नहीं है. They were also, they said हम रात को गए. These girls who otherwise not allowed, many of them not allowed to इधर उधर घूमना नहीं allowed है. रात को गए, कैमरा हाथ में लेकर, हाथ कांप रहे थे और वो ड्रग वाले, दारू वाले, वो सब फोटोज लिए. Those, some of them of course were very shaky and trembly, but we did use them in the exhibition. Now this exhibition was held in a public space, in a public hall. We had a journalist who visited it and loved it, and she took one special photograph she published in the Mumbai Mirror of these boys and men on the motorcycle outside the public toilet. What happened? Next day, hell broke loose. The mother was aghast seeing her son on that photograph. We didn't realize this was going to happen. So they 40 of them stormed into a 10 by 10 basti of this girl. They knew who had taken the photograph. Since I'd seen some of them taking photographs, कि ये क्या हुआ, तो मेरे लड़के को क्या हो जाएगा, पुलिस लेके जाएगी, blah blah. अरे but तेरा लड़का उधर खड़ा क्यों है, बैठा क्यों है? So that part they don't see. They don't see the girl's part, even the mother. So all hell broke loose, you apologize and all. And so we were worried that these girls would have a problem in the basti. But they said, Chinta mat karo teacher, hum dekh lenge, hum idhar hi rehte hain. Fortunately, nothing happened. But you know what the outcome was? The parking space was removed from there. So that was a happy outcome. Then another of our workshops which we did on photography was on menstruation. They were to write their stories, what they felt about menstruation, and take photographs on what they felt. So they took all, and I'll show you, I don't know if you can see, this book. There is this photograph of these cloths, cloth in the wall. Now that became a big image. We published this book on girl stories on menstruation. It has multiplied. It has been used as advocacy on girl stories on menstruation. Not only that, now this book on girl stories with their photographs and with their stories have been made into postcards by Agents of Ishq. That is the web, Paramita Vora's web site. So again, it's multiplied. So these little things, alternative media has worked. Now, they've also taken, when we spoke to some of the girls that, are you happy with, why are you taking these type of pictures? They think, teacher, हम तो वाचा के हैं, तो हम अपनी कहानी बताना चाहते हैं. कोई और होता तो शायद सुंदर सुंदर फूल फाल के फोटोज लेते, but हमें पता है कि हमें अपनी बातें बतानी है. So they already are empowered in that way. And they also felt bad. They said कि हम तो कर सकते हैं, but काफी लड़कियां ये एग्जीबिशन तक भी नहीं पहुंच पाते हैं क्योंकि उनको परमिशन ही नहीं है. तो उनकी आवाज कहां से उठेगी? We hope we can answer that sometimes. Then along with photographs, obviously we've also done little videography. So they've been documenting their own stories. And now during the lockdown, much more. Now since they have video cameras, so of course they do much more of the ration distribution or any stories that they want to. And when if we talk about writing stories and all, obviously one more aspect of the media is press conferences. These girls have also held press conferences. We were nervous, but they were not. They said, क्या है, हम तो बात कर रहे हैं, हमें तो अपनी बात बोलनी है. So they've held press conferences. One was maybe 15 years back, and I know one journalist from the regional language was a little saying, ये लड़कियां ऐसे कैसे बोल सकती हैं कि उनके घर में माता पिता लड़के और लड़कियों में भेदभाव करते हैं. Then he said, मेरी बच्ची भी ऐसे सोचती होगी, घर जाके मुझे कुछ सोचना पड़ेगा. So, well, you can say the penny dropped at least somewhere. And their press conferences also meant that they could be interviewed on radio, and all, so they've done that. Then back to traditional media, you can't, we obviously use a lot of that, like posters and pamphlets. Right now, especially during COVID times, they've been using their posters and pamphlets to rally around to get more people vaccinated, to convince. So they do make their PowerPoints and their posters and pamphlets. And while they're doing that, that means they have to have a one-to-one discussion with them. So they're confident enough to do that. So that's an important thing. And then, of course, social media. One of our program participants who was, say, at that time, maybe she was in college, 16-year-old. She's saying, Facebook तो है, but मुझे बंद करना पड़ेगा क्योंकि मेरा छोटा सा भाई ने बोला कि Facebook नहीं चाहिए. So then she thought, but मैंने manage किया, मैंने दूसरे नाम पर कर लिया. So we are still in the age when these girls, many of them, have to still count. The girls are still facing things like that. It's where social media is concerned. That younger brothers, chotus, are dominating and are still in a position to take decisions. Gradually, we found that this girl said, I have ignored my brother. I have my own Facebook page. I don't listen to him. Because after all, some of them are earning also. They earn, they work, and they study. And the brothers, nahi, usne to bada mobile liya and he's not doing anything. So those genders, and they are aware of it and are now and have been working towards change. Some, like we are saying on Facebook, they talk about their stories. They write their poems, and they've been writing their poems all along. And some of them have also started their own blogs. One of them has got a job, especially because she was writing a lot on Facebook, and on our Buland Kishori, we have this network of learning community, that page. So she's working with a funding agency and also contributing towards social media. So, and we hope there'll be many more who they have said they would be interested in writing and working on behind the cameras or in front or on print. We do hope they do. And I think I will end with a poem from one of the girls who, I can tell you, she was the one who took the photographs, who in the beginning was writing a lot of poems about hum itni dukhi hai, ladkiyon ko ye nahi mil raha, wo nahi milta, and all that. And after some years, this is what she says. Sapne to aakhir sapne hai, pabandi se dhire hai raaste, धुंधले है चेहरे ख्वाब के परवाह नहीं, बढ़ गए अब हौसले, बादलों को छूटे हुए बढ़ना है, अब कोई भी रुकावट आए परवाह नहीं. Thank you.
Nischint, you have given a very, very inspiring profile, and especially working among adolescent girls, the kind of uphill task that the Vacha had performed. But how do you, whatever you have created collectively in terms of albums and films and documentaries and posters and photographs, how do you disseminate them? And because the problem is that the creativity of the women's movement, how can we take it, reach out to millions of people? Because the way mainstream media has a reach, what are the ways in which we can use? And can we deprivatize this kind of resources so that we can social?
Yeah, we are trying to do that. Some of our resources are freely downloadable on the website, and we are going to be downloading more. But we do need wider dissemination. Our documentary Bhitar Bay has been shown on national television and some other channels. But and then because of the photographs, they have been used in the press, so there's been coverage, and so their issues have been has reached out to more people, but there has to be the mainstream media has to use the stories of girls, of marginalized women in a bigger way. These girls have started to speak out. There are others, other organizations who are writing about women, places like Nirantar and
Sangatnas, all productions, all their plays, music ballets, and songs from nights way back in 1972 are in public domain. And even when you go to the remotest part of Maharashtra, you would see Adivasi girl, Dalit girl, daughter of a agriculture labor, reciting those songs, no? Yes. Even Mulki Jali, they have by-hearted it because it is in public. Like
it still gives us a kick when from the Kishori Geet, Beti Hu Mai Beti has become a national song for girls. It's really thanks to UNICEF and the government departments, they have disseminated it largely. So it's been disseminated in lakhs. So these
NCRT is used. If you click the NCRT channel, the first thing comes out is Akash Ganga Surya Chandra Tara. It's in Hindi version. Yeah,
and even a book on gender, this one, puberty, and this one has also been widely disseminated. Yeah. So, but it's still not on the main platform. It's on alternative platforms with NGOs and through UNICEF and things like that. So let's see if
more
the
women's groups have to have their own radio. I have seen only Kutch Mahila Vikas Kendra,
Yes.
which is a community radio with a reach of 300 square kilometer. It reaches.
There are other community radios.
Easy for the reach, but I think we need to have our own community radios also.
Yes,
And
there are
Ministry of Science and
apparently.
Technology is giving the funding to set
And
up.
this voluntary also,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Universities have started using it. So now I think we will go to there is a one question in the question box and that is about, I think it has disappeared, but there was a question where they said that when women are into any kind of a media production, the commercial viability becomes the main thing. And like the onus of commercial viability falls on women. Dr. Anita Parihar, what would you like to say to this question? There was a...
Yes, can you please repeat the question? I was on the chat box.
The question, just now it is not there, but it was very much there, where the participant had asked that when women produce any media production by women, the question of commercial viability is very, very important. So
yes.
Your content may be very strong. So it is here, here it is there. Does content created by women have an added responsibility of sparking conversation on social issues and feminism? Should that added pressure be there when women-led content in the mainstream is rare to begin with? The onus of balancing commercial success and social responsibility seems to be on women. They cannot break free, into inverted comma, even in the content they create. May the speakers comment on this? And
yes.
Yeah.
I'll put it in two ways. First is when you have a content that you believe in and you strongly want to make a message out of it, which is based on research, you have to see parallelly what are the options of that content under which gamut of programming will accept it, because otherwise it will be a thankless task. So you have to think of your audience when you write content. It cannot be in a vacuum. It has to be an audience. Now the audience is supported by a channel, or it's supported by a YouTube channel, or it's supported by a mainstream channel. So it's like you write a letter to a principal. You are writing because you're writing to the principal, you write accordingly. So for media, when you write content, it has to be according to the audience. Secondly, then you have to understand that the wider the audience, the better of salability for your program. In terms of, if my content is on domestic violence, I will make sure it has a secondary and a tertiary audience besides the main audience, in that domestic violence is not restricted to a particular ethnicity or a socio-economic strata, but it cuts across the spectrum so that I have a wider audience. So when you're making a program for television, you must consciously keep in mind your goal vis-a-vis what will be accepted, vis-a-vis it reaching the widest audience. Then you have a better chance of uploading it. Of course, today the chances are much more than earlier. If your content is king, definitely you'll have takers. But then you need to go through this process. Very important.
Yeah, no, but the problem is that you may not have commercial success, okay, initially. But long-term interest of the society, that is also very important, because why we should be obsessed about first week of celebrity box office? No, that is a question. That you can use it as a documentary for classroom teaching, for any special interest group. So I think that is also the value. Once such a massive effort has gone into it, so we also should see that what can be the long-term advantages of having such.
Long-term effort has to be thought at the genesis of the content in terms of who are the likely supporters, because otherwise it's a very thankless exercise when there are so many good films in Cannes or projects in Cannes which are not seen the light of day because of not looking at it far-reachingly. But today, because of the OTT, because of the streaming services, the platforms are so many more for a content writer or a content maker than before. And the other thing that can help is if there is somebody who can support you as a brand for your kind of content, then you get more leverage. Right now, what's happening is how to monetize your content after you've got a decent platform is by doing all this in terms of your research as a content writer in conjunction with the team. It cannot happen in a vacuum. It has to parallelly develop.
So
So
we
that's
also
why
see some young student, the student of demography was doing PhD and was trying to work on declining sex ratio. And he through his field work, he was wanted to tally census figure with what he saw in the field. And he found so many girls who had a name called Nakusha. The Nakusha was an Anganwadi teacher, Nakusha was a school, agriculture labor, Nakusha was studying in a school. And he was intrigued that why so many girls in Maharashtra, rural Maharashtra, have Nakusha. And then he came to me and he says that what Nakusha means unwanted. And then we said, okay, you are doing your field work, why don't you film it? And he made a film in called Nakusha, and which even now the censor is the student made film. And
Yes.
Now it's extremely useful. It resulted we sent the film to the census authorities, and the census authorities, they sent the GR to all schools in Maharashtra that please give us the list of Nakushas you have. They got more than 6,000-7,000 girls, women whose names were this thing. Then they sent the GR to all panchayat, village councils, that these girls can change the names if they want. And so many of them changed. And it became like a renaissance in the rural Maharashtra. So I think that is the kind of impact you have, no? And currently he's made it, because just what the student has to go only with he took the film on his smartphone. He made all this thing, and then he edited. He took a help of editing, and now he's doing PhD in IIT Hyderabad. So I think this kind of alternatives, and I think Khevana can tell us, are your students making film? Please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Not directly our students, but our BMM section does make a film. They have a studio of their own, but our students are critically looking at these kind of films, or looking at them with a gender lens. As I said, all the OTT platform, each student had taken one web series or one film and looking at it from a gender perspective. Films made by other organizations like Akshara and others are used in classroom teaching as a part of dissemination. All episodes of Satyam Jayate, which are easily available and downloadable, talks by Kamala Basin, the special.
Even Ek Kahani, we were using it in a foundation course. Ek Kahani serial.
Correct.
Which was being used.
Toxic masculinity, the episode on sex selective abortion. These episodes of Satyam Jayate are because they are all inclusive and there are known faces on the screen. It becomes very effective tool for teaching in the classroom. Shorter film, yes. I mean, maybe 2 or 3 minute films are being made when the topic is given, but pandemic and mobility is a major issue right now. So with whatever resources that they have, limited resources,
what would you like to say, Dr. Satyam Patel, about commercial versus educational gender sensitive media?
So, okay, I think that we have to, when we talk about media, and if the ultimate outcome is in the form of an impact or action, then the outreach becomes very important. So when we talk about commercial versus educational, of course, commercial also needs to express a fresh and balanced perspective, because only then it will reach to people. And as I said, social change, the pace with which we make social change or achieve social change is not always the desirable one. And so, of course, while educational is extremely important because it creates awareness, commercial is also very important because we want to reach to as many people as possible.
Okay, Nischint, what would you like to say as a way forward for all of us when it comes to gender and media. What should we do? Yeah. So please unmute yourself. Yeah.
The way forward is more and more people should be able to access media, the marginalized girls, women, and other marginalized people. Only then their voices can be heard. It should be encouraged, and in various platforms. It's not necessarily only print, like we have more stories. It's nice to know that, like we are seeing, there are more films on different topics which are happening. It's hopefully there'll be more. And we know that the economics of feature film is too big, but there are the OTT and other platforms, and even basically social media, and there's so much now happening on just your simple mobile phone. So a lot of content is being created, will be created for a simple mobile phone, which may be a one-to-one. And we hope the way forward is more and more women will be able to have a voice.
Thank all of you, Dr. Anita Parihar for initiating the debate and discussing, Dr. Khevana Desai, Dr. Saptam Patel, Madam Nischint Hora, for enriching the discussion through your raising of issues based on your ground reality and your first-hand experience. We are at a stage where there has been a democratization of media. There is no one monopoly. We have a multiplicity of media, both commercial and state-controlled media. We have social media has made all of us writers and photographers and editors and viewers. And I think what we have seen, that accessibility and affordability is very important, especially due to the digital divide, that how women and gender-based digital divide is extremely important uphill task that we need to address. And main mission of any one of us who are into education, who are into media, who are in the women's rights movement, is a social construction of responsible, gender responsive boys and girls, men and women, and citizens. I think with this, I would like to once again thank IMPRI team for providing this democratic platform for an important discussion on gender and media.
Thank you very much, IMPRI, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you so much to everyone for this very, very enriching discussion. It was really very important. It is actually very important to bring out such discussions in the public domain and also keep talking about it. So thank you very much. I would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of the Gender Impact Studies Center at IMPRI to our speaker, Ms. Anita Parihar. Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful lecture. Please share your PPT and
I've already sent it.
Yeah, we'll be putting it up on the website and for everybody to have a look at it. Thank you so much. It was really wonderful listening to you. And thank you to all our distinguished panelists. Dr.
Even your concept note can be copy edited by Dr. Seema and published. She has written such an exhaustive concept note. Yeah.
Sure,
with
all
the references and all you have. Yeah.
Yes, we'd love to do that, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for that suggestion. And I really extend my gratitude to our discussants, Dr. Khevana Desai, and motive. For your time and ready for your questions. And I would also send my gratitude to all those today on Facebook Live and also on Zoom, and also those who would be watching us later on YouTube and also listening to us on our podcasts. So I wish you all thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.